This podcast is brought to you in part by a partnership with the Hill Country Tribune and associated sponsorships from individual endowments and corporate and private sponsorships. A special grant has been given for this podcast from the Grant and Edith Monterey Endowment Fund. Published in part in conjunction with Texas State Media Distribution to our radio, satellite, and television partners throughout the state. Well, as expected, it was a busy week in Austin. I'm Matt Pierce with Texas State Media Distribution and the Hill Country Tribune. As the 85th Texas Legislature kicked off this week, and the legislative session is in full swing. Tuesday was the first official day of the session, and it was filled with all of the pomp and circumstance that you could really imagine. Tuesday was a day of friendship, togetherness, and love at the state capitol, but soon enough, those gloves would come off and they would be back to sparring with each other. Tuesday, pretty much the members of the legislature were sworn in, rules were made, and they were only spent a few hours on the House and Senate floors before members of both houses of government kind of rushed off to their ceremonies and events. So it was a pretty uneventful day other than the fact that they were sworn in. But Wednesday, which marked the second day of the 85th, here in Austin, lawmakers, they kind of found themselves trading punches over who's allowed to use which bathroom in the state capitol. During a debate on the House floor on House Resolution 3, which is really just a standard housekeeping resolution that sets the rules for people with access to the House chamber as well as salaries for certain Capitol employees, State Representative Matt Schaefer, Republican from Tyler, brought up an amendment that would restrict people in the Capitol from using bathrooms that corresponded with, or restrict people to using bathrooms in the Capitol that corresponds with their biological sex. Now, this amendment kind of comes amid a controversy and kind of a hurricane, if you will, that's brewing over Senate Bill 6, the so-called bathroom bill by State Senator Lois Kolkhorst of Brenham. Senator Kolkhorst of Brenham, her bill would require transgender people to use bathrooms in public schools, government buildings, public universities, based on their biological sex. And it would preempt local non-discrimination ordinances that allow transgender Texans to use the bathroom that corresponds with their identity, not their birth certificate. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who oversees the Senate, and is also one of the highest-ranking members of the government, identified the bill as one of his top priorities for the session. During this little sparring match that happened with Representative Schaefer in the House, House Administration Committee Chairman Charlie Guerin, Republican from Fort Worth, he really wasted no time Wednesday employing this kind of parliamentary maneuver called a point of order, and it was directed totally at kind of scuttling Schaefer's proposal of forcing you to use the bathroom that corresponds with your identity, or with your birth identity, and not your transgender identity, if you will. So the whole idea was meant to scuttle Schaefer's proposal. Guerin argued that the amendment was not germane, and it wasn't relevant, and he noted that the State Preservation Board, not House rules, decides policies for the Capitol. After a short delay on the House floor, the amendment was eventually withdrawn and taken back, and Guerin's resolution passed with 145 members voting for it. I believe, if I remember right, 4 members were absent, if I did my numbers correctly. So it was basically a moot point, but the gloves were coming off as early as Wednesday for this so-called bathroom bill debate. House Speaker Joe Straus downplayed the urgency, though, on the bathroom bill legislation, saying that it's not an urgent concern of mine. Surprisingly enough, Joe Straus, the Speaker of the House from San Antonio, a Republican, says that this is just not an urgent concern of mine. And on Tuesday, in his opening remarks to the session, he appeared to kind of take a little jab there at the bill, telling members of the House of Representatives to focus on policies that invite economic activity to the state and not turn it away. And that's been a big discussion, saying that some companies, such as Amazon, may pull out of the state of Texas unless we adopt a transgender bathroom bill. Joe Strauss seems to say, with his comment, invite economic activity and not turn it away, kind of leads you to wonder, where does Joe Strauss, the Republican from San Antonio, really stand on the bill? Speaking of Joe Strauss, he's the sitting Speaker of the House. He won that position he won re-election to that position overwhelmingly, but not before Representative Scott Turner of Frisco decided he was going to challenge him for the seat. Didn't really work out too well for Turner, but he did challenge him. For the last 20 sessions, if a challenger did emerge, he or she would withdraw themselves before the vote. But not this day. But it really didn't matter, because Turner ended up getting only 19 of 148 votes on the floor. So his supporters suggested Strauss was not conservative enough to lead the very strong Republican majority. And you can kind of see that with Strauss not really taking a hardline position on Senate Bill 6 or the bathroom bill. But Strauss kind of took this almost a consolation tone in his acceptance speech, which was aimed to members of both parties. This House is about something that's bigger than all of us, he told the Chamber's 148 members in attendance. It's about fair process that points us towards common ground, a process that respects hard work and respects the will of every district and the judgment of every member. Joe Strauss is from my hometown of San Antonio, and has been in the House of Representatives and been a speaker for some time. Seems to be a pretty strong leader. Joe Strauss, it seems like he has his head screwed on straight. Perhaps his counterpart, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, over in the Senate, maybe there's a little bit of a disagreement on this very controversial bathroom bill. Now, that's not the only thing before the state legislature. Obviously, there's a lot of bills trying to get pushed through over the next 140 days. There's a lot of different ways that these bills get through, but another very controversial bill could be controversial, is whether we're going to outfit our police officers with body armor, and the taxpayers split the bill for it. Now, there's two sides to this. I don't know exactly which side I stand on myself. It doesn't really matter, but one's left to think, where's the money going to come from? You can say that you can't put a price on a life. I understand that. But some of the proponents and opponents are really sparring over this bill, because Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick is announcing that he wants to take $25 million in funds to kind of put this together to give these police officers this ballistics vest and this body armor. But nobody's really sure, and even Dan Patrick has come out to say where this money for this is going to come from. Now, some people can say different transportation funds, different bills, whatever, but ultimately there's also a property tax bill that is aimed to lower property taxes for property owners and homeowners in the state, which would decrease revenue for the state with the price of oil dipping like it has. The state's just not making as much money as they used to. Education, it's going to be a big priority. Fixing the Department of Family and Protective Services, that's going to be a big priority. That's going to need money. Schools are going to need a lot of money. Going to need just an overall kind of overhaul, if you will. And now Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick seeks $25 million to outfit police officers throughout the state with these vests. Now, I mentioned earlier that controversial tax bill. Schools are not really on board with this, because it is going to take money away from the school system that is already struggling in this state. There's already a huge problem in this state with our education system. Most of the schools, a lot of the schools are failing, receiving C to F grades. NEA has stepped in, and there's been some real concerns there about what will happen. But again, the schools need funding. They need money to operate. This tax bill, the schools are arguing, saying, hey, where's our money going to come from? I personally, again, when it comes down to these vests, I would rather my children get a better education than put body armor on a police officer. I mean, I know that sounds critical. I know that sounds harsh. But at the end of the day, what's more important, and I think that's going to have to be the answer that legislators come to over the next 140 days. So, in short, that's what's happened this week in Austin. That's what's happened on the legislature. A lot going on this week. We're going to be here to cover it for you, as always. And we want to talk to you a little bit about, especially if you live in the Texas Hill Country, I want to stop and talk to you for a little bit about our new partner called the Hill Country Tribune. I have been selected to be the managing editor-in-chief of the Hill Country Tribune. Now, just because it says the Hill Country Tribune does not mean that if you're in Houston, Dallas, or San Antonio, you cannot put in your 2 cents. You're more than welcome to. But this is really dedicated to the people that live in Central Texas, and not just in the Hill Country in Central Texas, but for rural Texans who we feel are not getting the representation that they need in Washington and in Austin for what they deserve. So, and it's about holding local, state, and national leaders accountable to the people that live outside of the major metropolitan areas. Just like this, it's a public service. We all know that I view journalism as a public good, not as a marketplace. And the Hill Country Tribune definitely follows my philosophy of that. So we want you to sponsor. We want you to definitely reach into your pocketbook if you can. And we would definitely like to if you would, just put the support, put the name out there, the Hill Country Tribune, on Facebook, Twitter, and of course our podcast. So anyway, this episode has been produced by yours truly, Matt Pierce, written by yours truly again, Matt Pierce, and I'm your host, Matt Pierce. That's your Texas Wrap for this week. Again, from Austin, I'm Matt Pierce, Texas State Media Distribution, and Hill Country Tribune. Have a great week.